Hello, my name is Glenn Gao. Well, actually, I'm not Glenn Gao. I'm what's known as a deep fake video of Glenn Gao. Glenn created this in only a few minutes. He did so to give you an idea of what is possible and what is coming in the world of AI. Who is the real Glenn Gao, and why is he talking to us about AI today? Glenn was a CEO for 25 years. He is now a CEO coach, a board member, and an expert on AI. Now, I'll turn it over to the real Glenn Gao. Thanks for listening. Hello, my name is Glenn Gao.
Let's get out of that. So what was that? I just showed you a type of AI called the deep fake video. This one is only of what I would call okay quality, but it cost me $10 and a few minutes of work to get it done. All I had to do was provide a picture of me, a sound file, not even saying those words, and then the text of what I wanted to say. And the AI put it all together, the picture, the sound file, and the text, and created that video. We've already reached the point where we can't trust what we read. We can't trust any images we see and any sounds we hear. And soon you will not be able to trust any video you see. Deepfakes are going to get very, very good, very, very quickly. And they're one of many types of AI we'll talk about today. I bring this up so you can see that AI is not just about ChatGPT. It's going to impact everything we do in business and in life. Let me jump. Oh, I skipped the slide. Why should you pay attention? And what should you do about it? So this is as technical as we're going to get today. Let's start with a simple definition of AI. It's simply software that learns from examples or data rather than being programmed on how to do something. On the left, we tell the computer what to do. On the right, we feed it data and it learns. What's compelling and different about AI is that it learns. In fact, a great deal of AI learns all by itself. This is the most important part of AI to remember, because unlike other technologies, because it learns, it's getting better every day. That is one of the reasons why we're hearing about it so much right now. Throughout this talk, I'm going to talk about all types of AI you need to pay attention to, and I'll spend a lot of time with everyone's favorite, ChatGPT. But ChatGPT is only the tip of the AI iceberg. When we start to look at AI, I will simplify the world into these two categories. Most people are interested in ChatGPT on the bottom right. However, I want you to understand that ChatGPT is only one small part of what's happening in the AI world. You may have learned about or heard about traditional AI in things like Google Translate, or your Tesla self-driving car, or in market research and science discovery. We're enthralled by Gen AI. Why? Because we now have a simple user interface on top of this powerful technology. We can suddenly see what it can do and we can interact with it. And generative AI goes way beyond ChatGPT and includes the deepfake video we just saw and other images and audio, and perhaps most importantly, code. AI will have massive impact on business. According to McKinsey, the total economic benefits of AI will be around $26 trillion. Most of that will come from traditional AI. I'm going to give you a few examples of AI that have nothing to do with ChatGPT or Gen AI. I want you to notice the breadth and depth of what is happening now. Let's look at a few existing applications before we dive into Gen AI itself. Right now, AI is rerouting traffic to improve traffic flow, adjusting traffic lights on the fly using social media, cameras, and other traffic data. And this is being done without human interaction. In warehouses, robots can pick and pack. They can even climb up on the shelves to grab things at higher altitudes and bring them back down and move them to a bin with your name on it. Many hundreds of thousands are in use, replacing warehouse workers' jobs. Some hotels enable a person to check in without any form of ID or human involved. AI uses facial recognition to verify who the person is and checks that against reservation information to allow a person to check in on their own. Why rely on the wait staff when a robot can do just as well? The job of a waiter is in jeopardy, as some restaurants are using robots to deliver food to the patron faster than a waiter can. AI can detect heart disease without a costly visit to the doctor. Think of the time efficiency and cost savings of not having to go to the doctor for a diagnosis. And the last one I'll mention here is the greatest invention in AI of all. It's called AlphaFold 2. Now, most of you are not scientists, but if you were, you'd recognize that Google's AlphaFold 2 is helping in drug discovery. Because this is used by scientists and biologists, like I said, we've never heard of it, but you will hear about it when it starts curing diseases. Curing diseases. AI is going to help us cure diseases. Again, I point this out because I want you to understand there's a lot more going on here than just ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT was only the first publicly exposed chatbot of its type. There are already many other chatbots entering the fray. I like to use multiple of them to see which ones do a better job for me given a certain task. Chatbots can do amazing things like create content, evaluate content, conduct research, provide advice, write code, write macros and spreadsheets, and more. And here's an example of what ChatGPT looks like. In fact, during this presentation, I'm going to jump in and show you how to use this in a couple of instances. We'll be there in just a minute. Here's an example of something that Google is doing right now. It's not available to the public yet, but so here I put in a query. Tell me what CFOs want to hear about AI. Now, it gave me some answers down here, but it also generated the answer without me having to click on anything. It generated an answer. So we're going to see this happen in Google search as well. Another kind of Gen AI is AI that creates images. Here are some of the most popular. Now, famously, Adobe has licensed all the images it trained itself on, and they guarantee you against copyright lawsuits for any images you might create. This is an example of Bing image creator. Very simple. You just type in what you want right here. Another kind of Gen AI is AI that creates code. Now, you may not have many people on your team writing code, but this is a massive game changer. Why? Because if you use ChatGPT to help you write a blog post, you may have a small number of people actually read that blog post. However, if you use one of these tools to put code into your product, you have the potential for millions of people to be impacted. Code writing will have one of the greatest impacts to us in generative AI. There are many, many tools that are coming out now that use Gen AI, too many to keep track of. I'm going to show you one of my favorite. It's called WordTune. Let's say you're reading Forbes and you see this interesting article. Now, it's going to take you about 6 minutes to read this article. And you might want to read it because it turns out I wrote this particular one. But if you use WordTune, what WordTune does, if you look on the right-hand side, is it summarizes the entire article into a 1-minute read. So I can do this all day long, saving me lots and lots of time. Going back to the most popular, I'm going to share a little bit about how to work with it. And I'm going to share with you what is true for all uses of Gen AI. The first thing that's true is I want you to think of them like interns. Sometimes they are really smart. Sometimes, though, they are completely wrong. And here's what's even worse. They will not tell you they're wrong. In fact, they'll tell you they're right when they are, in fact, wrong. Let me jump into the world of prompting for a moment. Work is shifting from creating stuff to prompting in order to create stuff. As a prompter, you need to learn to educate the AI so that it will give you satisfactory answers. In a minute, I'm going to jump back and forth between my presentation and ChatGPT to show you how this works. If I give ChatGPT this prompt, this is what's called a weak prompt. It's too broad. It won't give me a satisfactory response. But let's use this prompt. Okay, now I'm going to jump out here so that I can grab this. You don't have to read this. I will read it to you. We're going to copy this and we're going to jump into ChatGPT. Now, before I paste this in the ChatGPT, I want to point out a couple of things. You want to use the Plus version. That costs $20 a month. You don't want to use 3.5. You want to use 4. And within 4, I can use various connection points here. My favorite to use, and I'm going to recommend we use, we're going to connect to the internet. So this means everything we ask it is live. It's not old, but because we're connected with Bing, it's live. So I'm going to put in that prompt that I just had. And it says, I'm speaking to a room full of senior executives about AI. I want you to be my speaker coach. I want you to help me provide valuable information and actionable advice. Provide that information to me in short bullets. Your tone should be professional with some urgency to act now. Now, notice I'm being very specific with ChatGPT, asking it to do something very specifically. And it says, here are the notes for your speech. Talk about the landscape, ethical considerations, the data strategy, talent, and culture. Now, the beauty of this is that I can start by using ChatGPT to tell me the things I think I want to present to you. I may not use all of this, excuse me, but this did an enormous amount of work for me. I didn't have to start from a blank page. Now let's jump back. We will go to the presentation. I'm going to share with you what's known as what I call the killer prompt. This is a killer prompt because if you ask me later, I'll send you this presentation. Excuse me, I got to get a drink of water here. This prompt is a dialogue with ChatGPT. Here's how I want you to think about ChatGPT. It's an intern, and you have a dialogue with the intern. And here, I'm having a dialogue where I'm asking it to help me create a prompt so that it gives me the best possible answer it can give me. Now I'm going to jump away from ChatGPT for a moment. I'm going to use what's known as a weak prompt here. Notice it's short, but I'm going to go into an image generation tool, creating a logo for my sneaker company selling to Gen Z. I'm not going to go into the tool. I'm going to show you the result here. I went into a tool called Stable Diffusion, one of the many tools out there. And here's my prompt: create a new logo for my sneaker company. Well, Stable Diffusion said, essentially it said, you know what, that's a weak prompt. Why don't you use these words like elegant and highly detailed and lifelike and photorealistic instead? And I said, okay, let's do that. And this is the result I got back. I was blown away. All I did was say, give me a logo for a sneaker, and it designed a sneaker, and I could use this as a logo, and it did this in 2 minutes. This is absolutely going to change the world of design. So I'm going to pause here for a moment and open the floor for any questions. I love questions. If you don't have any, it's okay, but it makes it a lot more fun if you have some questions. We're going to jump ahead then. Let's talk about how it will affect the financial professional. This chart shows some of the areas where you can see traditional AI on the left fits in and where Gen AI on the right fits in with a combination in the middle. I'm going to show you other areas where AI can make an important contribution in finance. First, in financial forecasting, AI can turn the CFO from someone who reports on what happened into someone who helps predict the future, which is of much more value to CEOs. AI can aggregate and process data with far greater speed and accuracy and scalability than what's humanly possible. The financial forecasting is done with traditional AI, not Gen AI. In process automation, AI can help with data capture, invoice matching, error detection, and on, including highlighting suppliers that frequently bill incorrect amounts if we're doing this in the area of invoicing. This is done with traditional AI. AI can be used to enhance data encryption, can conduct analyses of the data while preserving privacy, and even prevent access when it detects abnormal user behavior. This is done with traditional AI. Let's look at fraud detection, and we'll use an example from ChatGPT. So we'll come in here, and I will paste this. You don't have to read it. Into ChatGPT. It says, I'm a certified fraud examiner, and I'm analyzing a data set in Excel to identify potential anomalies that could indicate fraud or errors. The data set consists of a single column of numerical values representing transaction amounts. I would like to create an Excel formula using the statistics module to calculate the z-score. And I'll go ahead and show you what it starts to do. Here's my prompt, very detailed prompt, and it's going to give me instructions on how to calculate the z-score for each transaction amount in Excel. Tells me exactly what to do. Now I need to point something out. I'm almost certain there's a mistake in here somewhere. This is something you need to understand about ChatGPT. It makes stuff up. And so what I would do is I would go through this, I would do this, and then I would check it myself to help figure out where is the mistake. It's just like having an intern hand this to you, and you really don't fully trust it. You should never fully trust Gen AI, but it can get you a long way to your solution. Let's look at another one, regulatory compliance. Okay, I'm going to give you this prompt. And I'll paste this for you. I'm an accountant working on a memo regarding the implementation of ASC 606 for my company. I need to explain the 5 key steps of the revenue recognition process as outlined in ASC 606. Provide a brief example, etc. Let's see what we get. It's giving me a memo. Identify the contracts with your customer. Identify the performance obligations in the contract. Determine the transaction price. Allocate the transaction price to the performance obligations, etc. Now, I want to point something out. Let's say this gives me a pretty good answer, but I don't think it's the answer I want. All I have to do is regenerate. And it will go do it again, and it'll get me a slightly different answer. And then if I use these 2 memos, I'm going to probably get 90% of what I need to create this memo. It's doing the work for me. Okay, let's jump to another example. Financial policy. There we go. Let's say you are the CFO. You need to create a policy for overseas travel expenses. Some executives commonly fly first class, and most individual contributors do not. Taking into consideration our culture of fairness and transparency, create a policy that satisfies everyone's needs. I happen to think that's a pretty hard job to do. But it's going to give me a draft. The point is, this is just a draft, but it's going to give me ideas that maybe I hadn't had before that I can use in my own document that I'm going to actually create. So what if I just didn't think about certain things like cultural sensitivity? I may choose to use that or not, but it's giving me fantastic ideas, and I'll be able to write that memo in about 5 minutes instead of maybe 30 minutes. Oh, I'll give you this. This is one of my favorite ones, document analysis. So here's a prompt. I will read this to you. You are the CFO of a micro-cap public company. You're considering reducing expenses to weather an economic storm. You've asked your VP of Finance to provide you with an expense reduction plan. Evaluate the plan found here. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to sneak back, and I have the plan. It's here. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to pretend I'm the CFO, and I got this from the VP of Finance, but I don't have time to read it. So I'm going to ask ChatGPT to give me an evaluation. Well, it's in the right direction. Here's an evaluation. Well, the summary is vague. Wait, it keeps bouncing around for me here. Recommendations for improvement. So now I have that proposal from the VP of Finance. I have an evaluation of the document. Now I can read both of those. I don't even have to read his proposal or her proposal as much as I would without going into, I don't have to go into as much detail if I think this actually addresses the points that are missing from that person's plan. I find this extremely, extremely helpful. Okay, I'm going to give you one more example. automating spreadsheets. So, oops, I messed that up. Let's see if we can recover from that. There we go. I'm going to give you one more example with ChatGPT. Okay, this is a long one. I won't read the whole thing to you, but I'm an accountant working with the monthly financial data for various departments in my company. I have an Excel workbook containing multiple worksheets, each representing a department's financial data for the month. Each worksheet has the same structure with the following columns. Please provide a VBA code snippet to help me automate this task in Excel. And I don't know about you, but I would much rather get help from ChatGPT to understand what the VBA code snippet should look like than have me do it all by myself. Just want to emphasize, this is a draft. I wouldn't use this exactly the way it is without testing it first. And when I test it, I'll probably find a mistake or two, but because I have this in front of me, I'm going to get this done in a very short period of time. Okay, now let us go to see if we have any questions this time. My chance for a break. Okay, I'm going to have one more section at the end for questions, and I want you to all think of the easiest possible questions you can ask me so I look really good today. Okay? All right. Let's jump ahead. What is happening with government regulations? So regulation is coming, and the EU is leading the way. Secondarily, it's individual states in the US, and eventually followed by the feds. Think of it like GDPR and the California privacy rights regulations. I don't know how they'll impact you yet, but they will. Here's one possibility that should concern you. The EU is proposing a restriction on using AI for things that might be high risk. Unfortunately, some seemingly innocuous AI applications may get caught up in that high risk net. An example is Duolingo. It's a simple, popular language learning program. It's an app. But because Duolingo is sometimes used for admission to educational institutions, it falls into the high-risk category. So Duolingo's market share will likely decline as a result of the EU's regulation, whether that really makes sense or not. The next is the states. Meta paid $750 million because they were fined by the state of Illinois. Why were they fined by the state of Illinois? Because the state of Illinois says you can't use biometric data on Illinois citizens. Well, all Meta did was they helped Facebook users say, hey, here's a picture of your friend in a picture. Wouldn't you like to know your friend was at that same event that you were at? That sounds innocent, but it's against Illinois law. Chuck Schumer recently met with the heads of most of the leaders in AI in closed-door sessions. I'm confident that what those leaders told him was that, yes, there needs to be regulation, but we are at war with China in the area of AI, and you need to give us the ability to win this war. Now, nobody's saying that out loud, but it's absolutely an incredibly important thing for the U.S. federal government to have as a consideration. Next, as many of you know, President Joe Biden just issued a wide-ranging executive order that aims to safeguard against threats posed by AI, ensuring that bad actors do not use the technology to develop devastating weapons or mount supercharged cyber attacks. I'll give you 3 highlights of this executive order. I'm just going to give you highlights because the order itself is 54 pages long, so you're going to have to read it if you really want to know more detail. 1, a key rule here is that companies conduct tests of some of their products and share the results with the government officials before the new capabilities become available to consumers. So these tests are known as red teaming, ensuring that new products do not pose a major threat to users or the wider public. An example might be if you type in, how do I build a nuclear bomb? The AI should come back and say, I'm not going to give you that information. But if it didn't and it gave you the correct answer, that would be a problem. Next, a sprawling set of industry standards in the hope of creating transparent products that are secure from dangerous outcomes, like I mentioned, a nuclear attack or biological material or cyber attacks. Another high-profile standard would codify the use of watermarks that alert consumers when they encounter a product enabled by AI. Another rule would ensure that biotech firms take appropriate precautions when using AI to create or manipulate biological material. And it also says that government agencies are going to need to implement changes in their use of AI, elevating federal institutions as examples of practices that the administration ultimately hopes will be adopted by the private sector. Quick pause here. Are there any questions before I go on to predict the future? Okay. This is one of my favorite quotes, and I am going to predict the future for you. Let's look at what's happening with big players in AI today. As you know, Microsoft partnered closely with OpenAI to incorporate ChatGPT into its search engine. And this is a real threat to Google. They're forcing Google to provide an even better search experience, and Google is now taking action. AI will be even more deeply embedded in every product Google and Microsoft own, and many, many other technology companies. All these tools will become easier to use, and we will be the winners. For many of these tools, you won't need to become an expert in AI. Rather, you'll need to become an expert in how to use the tools. My recommendation to you is to adopt the changes you'll see in common software quickly. Lean into these changes. Encourage your organization to lean into these changes. For example, Bloomberg has come out and said, hey, we have our own system that's based on financial data and finance-specific language. Their generative AI is being trained on their unique data set, which is not available to ChatGPT. We're going to see more and more specialization in generative AI systems. My recommendation is to keep a close pulse on the changes that can impact you and take advantage of the ones that apply to you. Focus on the bar on the right, showing an explosion of investments to $14 billion so far this year, I think as of June of this year. So this number is much larger now. I recommend you consider talking to your vendors, talking to the vendors who are selling to you and the vendors you currently have about where their product could be a good fit for you and experimenting with them. Again, your job isn't to become an expert in AI. Rather, your job is to ensure your company is creating a competitive advantage wherever it can. Focus on how your department can add more value by taking advantage of AI. Think of AI as a tool. It's like a knife. It can spread butter or it can do real damage. Be prepared for intentional bad things and unintentional bad things. I'll just use one example. AI is already being used to help hackers hack. A lot of this is coming from foreign states. We're now in an arms race to use AI to protect us while the bad guys are using AI to hack us. My recommendation is make sure your security vendors are at the cutting edge of this arms race. We're starting to see something I call the information blizzard. Content has become cheap and easy. We will be overwhelmed by it. Some of it will be low quality. Some of it will be misinformation. Some of it will be your competition getting ahead of you. And some will be good information. But I want you to read this next headline. I didn't believe this when I saw it. This means if you are an author or just a regular person, you can only publish 3 books in one day. And then the next day, you can only publish 3 books. Why is this happening? Because people were publishing many more than 3 books a day. What does that mean? That there's a lot of books being published, and Amazon is happy to do that because they get to sell these books that were created by generative AI that may or may not have any value to them, and yet Amazon's going to make money with them. Now, I've heard about a book that was generated by generative AI. It's about mushrooms. And in the book, it talks about how to determine whether a mushroom is edible or poisonous. Now, that's really scary because no one is editing that book. And no one knows whether or not what it has produced is useful information or dangerous information. But this is the information blizzard that I'm talking about. I'd like to talk about job loss for a moment. First, I want to shift your thinking. What AI is going to replace is tasks. If your job is made up of many tasks, AI will help you with some of those tasks and take over some of those tasks. For many workers, this will enable them to work on more interesting tasks. For some workers, like long-haul truckers, where their job is made up of a small number of tasks that can be automated, they're going to lose their jobs. And remember when I talked about all the robots in warehouses that have already replaced workers? People are losing their jobs now. In the past, we've often enabled people to be more productive with technology, and we adapt. AI will be different. We will see job change happen in 3 ways. Some new jobs will be created. Most jobs will change in a positive way. And many jobs will be lost. And I fear that this time the loss of jobs will be more significant than in the past. Part of the reason I believe this is the speed of change that we're seeing in AI is becoming faster than most humans are able to adapt and learn. My recommendation is to prepare for change in your organization. Assess where these changes are likely to occur and predict what the future of your workforce will look like so you can manage that now. On this slide, the black bars represent how automation will affect these types of jobs without generative AI. Okay, right here, applying expertise, managing, interfacing with stakeholders. This is how automation will affect these jobs without generative AI. The blue bar represents the potential for automation with generative AI. So what's really interesting here is that decision-making and collaboration, the things that we think of as our jobs, is going to be greatly impacted by generative AI. So these are senior jobs that are going to be greatly impacted by generative AI. The key takeaway is that we never thought we were going to be significantly impacted by AI in our jobs. This is not just about blue-collar work being supplanted. This type of work is being done by many of you today. We'll be impacted more than we thought and in ways we never imagined. Here are a few professions that are going to be profoundly impacted by AI, and very soon. So you want to ask yourself, how will these changes affect your company? So I have a recommendation for you, is that if you have people on your team that are doing some of this work, encourage them to lean into AI now, because the people who are going to succeed are the people who lean into AI. The people who don't succeed are not going to be using AI, and they're going to lose their jobs. So I have a set of resources if you'd like to learn more about what's happening with AI, and I'll send a copy of this presentation to our host so you can get a copy of this. And I'll end with a story. One of my CEOs sold her company. She was very technical and remained as a consultant to the company after the sale. One day, she was helping out with a particularly thorny problem. She was consulting back to the company, was pretty sure she could solve it. So at the end of the day, she sent a note to the overseas development team asking if they'd like her to write an algorithm to solve the problem. Makes sense, right? She knows the product better than anyone else. When she woke up in the morning, she received an email that was devastating to her. A junior software developer wrote back to say, no, you don't need to write an algorithm to solve the problem. I had ChatGPT do it. Why was she devastated? She said to me, Glenn, I've always been known as the person who could solve problems no one else could solve. Now I feel worthless. Now I don't know how I'm going to add value in my life. Now I'm really worried about my future. This type of impact will be happening up and down the management chain. My recommendation to you is to train your teams to lean into AI, to learn what they have to do to continue to add value in an AI world. I'll do my best to answer your questions if you have any. And if you think of some later, you can always email me. So we'll stop sharing.
Do we just want to jump in with our questions?
Please do.
Okay,
right.
so I have a question. Glenn, wonderful and horrifying, I think at the same time, the speed in which all of this is happening and the impact that it's going to have on organizations. And so when, you talk about leaning in, and I appreciate the fact that you're sending out the presentation and the list of resources, but is there sort of a training resource that you would suggest that I could do with a team that would help all of us start thinking about this and start leaning into, how it could be helpful in our business?
So, Lynn, I'll give you what I think is, let me answer your question this way. The best thing you can do is what one of my CEOs did. One of my CEOs said, okay, at an all hands meeting, the CEO said, okay, we have 3 weeks. I need every single employee to use ChatGPT. You can pick your tool. That's the easiest place to start. I would recommend there. Every single employee needs to use ChatGPT at some point over the next 3 weeks, and you need to report to your manager, what did you learn? I don't care about the results. I care that you're using it and you're getting a feel for it. And I thought that was brilliant because people are afraid of these tools. They're afraid of what might happen. They're afraid they might lose their job. Now, if I was going to be specific, and in my department, I had, I don't know, a bunch of financial analysts, I would say the same thing, but I'd say, first, go to YouTube and say, I'm a financial analyst. Show me some ways I could use ChatGPT in my job, and you'll have a whole bunch of YouTube videos saying, here's a way to do this kind of analysis, and here's a way to do that. But then you have to have people do it with your own information. Now, I want to talk just real quickly about privacy because there's a concern around privacy. You don't want to put your financial data into ChatGPT unless you have previously protected that information, and you can do it 2 ways. You can go into the settings. I don't even know how to do it, but into the settings and protect that data, or you can get what's called the enterprise version of ChatGPT. And by license, it protects your data. It doesn't share it with the rest of the world. So I don't want anybody on this call sharing confidential information without protecting it first, but it can be protected.
Okay. That sounds great.
Okay, Tim has his hand up.
Yes. Okay, you've talked about ChatGPT, and then also OpenAI owned by Microsoft. All right. Are they the only place you could go? Because I Googled it as you're talking here, and everything does point back to OpenAI. Because you say go learn it. And also, is that a concern if it's Microsoft and OpenAI has a monopoly on it? What's your thoughts there?
Not at all. Let me go. I want to answer your question with a slide. Here we go. Let me just share my screen for a second. There we go, share. So here, Tim, are some examples. Here we have ChatGPT. Now, you should know technically it's not owned by Microsoft. It's a separate company. It's been funded by Microsoft, but it's a separate company.
Okay.
Over here is this is Microsoft's product that happens to
Okay,
use a
yeah.
lot of ChatGPT. Okay, but it's different. Over here is Google, which, by the way, is going to emerge as the big winner, because they are truly the winner in this space right now. Their problem is what's called the innovator's dilemma. So they can't come out and make a lot of mistakes, but they're doing way more work than anybody else in this area. Pi is another one. This one is designed almost like a counselor to be nice to you and help you take care of your personal problems. And then a direct competitor of ChatGPT is called Claude. I like using these side by side to see what kind of answer I get. And then just showing you this one other slide again, image creator. So it turns out that just recently, ChatGPT gives you the ability to create images. I'll show you here on my screen. If I go into ChatGPT, I'm going to go to a new chat. Here in ChatGPT 4, I'm going to choose this thing called DALL-E, which is a play on words after Salvador Dali. And I can ask it to, let's see what it does. A CFO. Now let's see what kind of bias shows up here. We know there's going to be bias, right? So it's creating images. It's not fast. But the point is, I'm going to go back to this slide while it's going to go do its work. I can do it through Bing. I can do it through Adobe. I can do it through Stability AI, Midjourney. And now we also have a version available. Here we go. I would say that's a non-biased image, given what most people would have expected.
Yeah.
Okay, great question. Any other questions?
Yeah, Glenn, you mentioned the word war over AI with China. Can you elaborate more on that?
Sure. So China has stated they want to be the leader in AI by 2030, and they're making a very, very serious commitment to that in terms of education, computing resources, and they view it as not just an economic competitive advantage, but for war as well. So we are seeing a race between China and the US in terms of what AI capability can provide to us, both economically and militarily. And the scary part is the militarily part, because we cannot predict what's going to happen in the world dynamic with China. But AI, the US military is very, very interested in what capabilities exist with AI that don't exist with just humans. And China is going down the same path. Now, that may or may not be the biggest issue. The bigger issue might be economically, because we have a lead here. We have Google and Amazon and Microsoft at a minimum, who are pouring billions and billions of dollars into this. China doesn't have as many leading companies doing this. And so we have a lead today economically in this space. And we want to keep that lead. And we know that China is committed to trying to get that lead from us. And so this is a real existential question about what do we do as the US government to protect this capability we have and become dominant in this space.
Is the government doing anything to support those companies and others?
Well, right now the SEC is trying to break a couple of them up. But I actually don't think that will have an impact in the world of AI. No, I think if you read the executive order, Biden's executive order, like most executive orders, it doesn't have any teeth. It has recommendations. And what I think what we're going to do is be very careful about what kind of teeth we eventually create from a regulatory standpoint, because we're going to depend on those companies to enable the US to succeed both economically and militarily. And so we want to be careful and balanced in how we do this. And generally speaking, the consensus about the executive order is that it's a pretty good start, but we have a long way to go. And it doesn't slow them down right now. All right, I know there are more curious people out there. Okay, so here's a question that I had while you guys were there. So remember the image of the CFO I just saw? We just saw? That I'm positive what has occurred is that when you build a large language model like ChatGPT, they recognize, this is one of the cool things about AI and bias. So you may have read a lot about bias in AI. So bias in AI comes from the training data. And the training data comes from humans. So humans have biases, which is why we see biases in the result. Now, this result, I'm going to show you the picture one more time. This result, I can't prove this to you, but this result is an example of what happens when AI companies are worried about bias. So I'm pretty sure we see this person here is not a white male because we're trying to, or ChatGPT is trying to not be biased. And this is a result of trying to not be biased. And I think that's a good thing. So by understanding how biases are created, we can start to program biases out of AI. Okay, any other curious people out there? Okay, if not, thank you very much. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions down the road.